Welcome to this session in which we present the findings of a case study on the accountability of multi-academy trusts in England. My name is Melanie Ehren. I'm an associate professor at the UCL Institute of Education, and I've been leading this study with David Godfrey between 2014 and 2017. This study was part of an EU comparative project where we looked at the changing role of inspectorates of education in more decentralized systems and how they can effectively hold educational networks to account. In addition to England, the study included Northern Ireland, which has area-based learning communities, the Netherlands with inspections of networks for inclusive education, and Bulgaria, which has thematic inspections of peer reviews of parental engagement in schools. The outcomes from these other countries can be found on the project website, which is presented on this slide. Before we start presenting the outcomes of our study, I would like to give you some background on the accountability landscape in England, particularly for multi-academy trusts. So multi-academy trusts are relatively new networks of academies in England. Academies are publicly funded independent schools which were first established by the Department for Education in 2002 to take over local authority-run schools where aspirations and achievement were deemed to be too low. Sponsors, such as companies or charities, were appointed to take these so-called struggling schools out of local authority control and turn them around. These sponsor-led academies receive their funding directly from the Education Funding Agency and are accountable to state government. In 2010, central government expanded the role of academies in the Academies Act, and there is now an expectation that all schools will convert to become an academy and join a multi-academy trust. Multi-academy trusts are chains of schools which are run by a board of directors on behalf of the trust. Academies and the trust must follow legislation on admission and exclusion of children and regulation around special education needs, but they have greater autonomy in areas of staffing, curriculum, and lesson planning. Multi-academy trusts are expected to promote collaboration between schools to support improvement, while also allowing for greater efficiency through, for example, the sharing of back-office IT and HR services across schools. There is great diversity in the types of multi-academy trusts in England, where some only have 2 to 3 schools in a specific region, and others, such as presented on this slide, have many schools and are nationally organized with schools spread across the country in different school phases. Our case study Multi-Academy Trust is an example of a nationally operating network with a head office in the southwest of England. The trust started with 1 secondary academy and grew over time with a peak in number of both primary and secondary schools in its 3rd year. Schools are dispersed across the country in several different counties. Some of the schools are in the same county as the head office, while others are located over 150 miles away. We collected archival data as well as interviewed head teachers, the CEO of the trust, Ofsted inspectors, and the regional school commissioner to understand how the MAT was held to account over a period of 5.5 years and how it changed in response to the external accountability. In our study, we wanted to understand how this external accountability impacted on the internal quality control of the network and in the network, as well as the properties of the network in terms of its governance, size and growth, and composition of primary and secondary schools. We are particularly interested in how the trust controls its own quality. And the literature on effective networks talks about 4 mechanisms mature networks use to control their own quality. The first one is how information is collected and disseminated on the credibility and quality of schools and the back office services, and how each partner contributes to the outcomes of the network, for example, through peer review or some other form of internal evaluation. The second mechanism of quality control is about how the trust and schools in the trust control the available facilities and resources in the network. The switching mechanism refers to whether the trust has a process in place to replace ineffective types of collaboration or ineffective types of support and joint work, while the final exclusion mechanism would see the removal of ineffective partners or services from the network entirely. We were interested to see if and how external accountability by regional schools commissioners and Ofsted has an impact on these four mechanisms of internal quality control. In addition, we also looked at changes in how the network is governed, its size and composition in terms of primary and secondary schools, and the geographical location of member schools. When we talk about the accountability of METs, we talk about four specific types of interventions which are organized at both the individual school level as well as the accountability of the network as a whole. First of all, each school in the trust is held to account through Ofsted school inspections and monitoring of a regional schools commissioner who acts on behalf of the Department for Education. These RSCs can decide to place schools under the authority of another trust, for example, when schools are failing. This process is called rebrokering and is preceded by a pre-warning notice. The accountability of the network also includes so-called badged inspections by Ofsted, where inspectors visit a sample of schools in the trust over a period of 2 weeks, where they would look at the quality of schools across the trust and how the support between schools and support of schools by the trust is organized across the network. At the end of a badged inspection, Ofsted also reviews the trust through interviews with the board of directors and the CEO of the trust and further document analysis to understand what structures there are to support school improvement. The RSC also monitors the trust through termly meetings with the CEO and his team, looking at performance data of schools in the trust and, again, how support is organized. So there's quite an extensive accountability system in place for multi-academy trusts and their individual schools, where the two main actors, Ofsted and RSCs, look at similar quality standards and use similar data to understand performance of schools and the trust. Now, our case study multi-academy trust is also subjected to these four accountability interventions over the course of our study. It had around 10 inspections of its schools in each year, where the majority of schools unfortunately have a failing inspection outcome. After 2014, RSC monitoring also becomes a regular item on the external accountability landscape of schools, with visits to failing schools and rebrokering of failing schools. RSC visits initially only include new schools and aim to support the opening of these schools. Over time, however, RSC visits become more formalized and rigorous, particularly when schools who were considered to be good by RSC advisors are put in special measures by Ofsted. Over the years, the external accountability on the level of the trust includes one badged inspection and MET review and termly monitoring visits of the RSC. Head teachers in our study explained how they and the trust back office were initially not aware of the badged inspection and how this was denied by one of the school inspectors. They also explained how the findings in the outcome letter are skewed towards the positive, as head teachers didn't want to criticize the trust, as that may have impacted on their own school inspections outcome. They also say that as more than usual credence is given to development plans, whereas in individual school inspections only results and actual practices are taken into account. Interestingly, our interview findings indicate that individual school inspections dominate the external accountability landscape of the trust, as these inspection outcomes are considered to be the most important benchmark of how the entire trust is performing. One of the key findings of our study is therefore that how the accountability of individual members of a network, such as the Ofsted inspections of schools in our trust, is organized, and the weight that is given to individual school inspections can prevent the development of the network as a whole, where members work towards joint and shared outcomes of goals. In our study, we found multiple examples of how Ofsted reports and the outcomes of Ofsted single school inspections, as well as the need to prepare for such inspections, motivates the trust to develop a structure of strong hierarchical control of its schools around the individual school inspection framework. Examples are how support from the trust and from schools with outstanding or good Ofsted grades is allocated to schools judged by Ofsted to require improvement, or schools in special measures. This creates a culture of firefighting which constrains the development of more sustainable mechanisms for internal quality control in the trust to monitor, support, and improve all schools over time. We also found that Ofsted school inspection grades inform how resources are distributed across the trust, where schools in special measures have to pay a higher membership fee into the trust to represent the increased level of support they need from the trust. Schools requiring improvement or who are in special measures are monitored more intensively by RCs and the trust, and are more likely to be rebrokered into other trusts. We also found that Ofsted school inspection grades inform head teachers' performance targets and how they are also held accountable on specific standards in the inspection framework by trust members. An important criteria for the allocation of schools to regional hubs within the trust was also their Ofsted grade, ensuring a mixture of schools with good and failing grades as an indicator of available and required support capacity across the trust. We also saw that trusts with a portfolio of overall good and outstanding schools acted as an example of good practice to our multi-academy trust, and how they tended to copy the structure and ways in which other schools collaborate in other trusts as examples of good practice. So Ofsted grades are used to understand which of the trusts are high performing. Governing bodies of schools which require improvement or are in special measures were also replaced with improvement boards by the trust, which included trust representatives who have a school improvement background. So all these examples really indicate how internal quality control in the MAT was focused on the performance of individual schools as measured in Ofsted frameworks, with little development of network-level outcomes that go beyond individual school outcomes. This is an important finding because if we want to ensure that networks have added value, such as in improving the transitioning of students from primary to secondary schools, we need to make sure that the accountability of the network has at least equal weight compared to the accountability of individual schools. In our EU project, we have mapped some alternative forms of external accountability which particularly focus on network level quality and outcomes, and these are presented on our EU website. Other findings of our broader work in the area of educational evaluation and accountability is also presented on the website of our UCL Research Center for Educational Evaluation and Accountability, and I invite you to have a look at these websites and contact us if you have more questions or are interested to hear more about this study. Thank you for listening to this session.